Michael, would you like to open with our karakia?
Kia ora tātou tui tēnei o rata. A tēnā ho mai tēnei ai akatupero o tātou i tēnei rata. Ka poina te kiwi te pau mō tēnei o mapō, ka keta ki te ngā kaka tarahai te tākiritanga o te ata. Ki runga i ngā mauna kōrero, mai mahurangi tua whenua tai atu rā ki taupia. I horehia i te whare ki ngā kōrero. Ai awhia papatūnuku tauhoto nei, ki arangi nui tui ho nei, tūturu whakamaua kia tīna. Aumi e hui e. Korena kia tātou.
Yes, I'll just call for apologies. We've got Kia Marama and Andrea.
Yeah.
And James Thomas.
Kevin Anderson, he's still on the box face. Yeah.
That one.
And we should.
And Jill and
And we should.
And Jill and Jane, yes.
We should continue to give Gladys's apologies. He still hasn't. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Still trying to convince her to put in resignation because he's busy.
So I really appreciate your making it today to make this quorum. So would someone like to move that the apologies be accepted?
Aye.
Thank you, Leo. Seconded, Rangi. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Now, have we got any other urgent business that anyone would like to raise? Declarations of interest. That will move on to the confirmation of our last meeting's minutes. So if there's someone who'd like to move that. Thanks, Gary. Move, Gary. Seconded.
Yep.
All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Right, we've got item 7.1, which is obviously our Waitangi, our 2024, which is our what we plan to do in the district for celebrating or commemorating or whatever word you want to use, observing Waitangi Day. And just interested, we obviously have this paper. We've got Andrea online. Good morning, Andrea. Our comms team, she's joining us online. Good morning. So if you'd like to introduce the paper, thanks.
Yeah, sure. Well, probably just needs a little bit of explanation because the last time we chatted about your thoughts on Waitangi Day was for the last event, and you made it quite clear that while you were happy to proceed with a community event in 2023, that probably wasn't the method you'd like to commemorate Waitangi Day for future years. So this paper's been put together really more as a discussion paper, but we do need some direction from you today on what you'd like to see for the 2024 event. Now, the recommendation that's been put up is a straw man. It is it is there. I could have picked any one of the options that have been presented and put that there in the recommendation. This is really just to give you some ideas, to generate some thoughts that could lead to some discussion to get some direction from the meeting today on, as I said, the event next year. And whether you wish to do anything, because of obviously not doing something is always an option. But option 6 is also there for the forum to consider, which is it could be a combination of any of the above. It could be something that's completely different that the group may have already been discussing that they'd like to see. So yeah, I'd like to just throw it open if that's all right, Madam Chair, for the forum members to provide some feedback and come to some sort of agreement, and potentially we can come back at the December hui with an outline if that involves council, if the ideas involve council.
Thank you. Any thoughts to kick off the conversation, the kōrero this morning? Perhaps I can ask a question, Andrew, just around while we're thinking, with the application for funding, what is the date deadline for applying for funding from central government?
The information that I've received to date, it's quite difficult to locate a deadline for funding, but I guess the sooner we get that in, the sooner that can be considered, because that fund has a limit on it. What I can tell you is that they have changed the criteria slightly, but it is based around hosting, still based around hosting an event, and bringing communities together. So, as I said, anything's possible in terms of how the group wishes to commemorate the 2024 event. Whether or not we wish to target the Ministry for Culture and Heritage Fund would then put some parameters around what that might look like.
Thank you. Any thoughts? You go for it, Gary. It'd be great.
Even though I don't wear iwi head at the table today, I'm just reflecting on from the conversations we had last time around, I guess, the difficulty of iwi to be able to just have the time to organise, to run, to bring people together to make these events happen. So just as a councillor, I like the option 3 that you've got on the paper. So I think I've been saying for a number of years now, it's about the day helping our community to understand what Te Tiriti is all about, and I think having a structured way of presenting stories about the impact of the treaty on our district is a really positive way to do that. But and I know that I guess the work is really around gathering that information and packaging it and presenting it in a way that the wider community can engage in is probably the way that I would like to think Waitangi Day would be. So that's therefore it's not about iwi actually having to put on events. It is more about working with maybe historians and some of the local people about understanding what are the impacts of the treaty over the years, and packaging that up into stories that can be shared. So, and I take I like the way that the Morrisville Museum has been doing some of their storytelling. They've actually done that, pull stories together, develop packages that are easily transferred into the community, so people can then start to engage with what is the real impact of Te Tiriti o Waitangi on our district, and in doing so, try to unpack what the treaty means to us as a country. So that's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Gary. Anybody else want to share something or make a suggestion or build on what Gary has just spoken about? I know Matariki has become a more spiritual, meaningful journey, I think, to be a part of, and maybe I'm just asked, are we heading more that way than the Waitangi? But I agree, Gary. And the work that's been done in Morrisville at the museum is outstanding around the history in general. Michael?
Given aside just a comment on the storyboard or narrative aspect of it, we're exploring the same at the moment with our shelters on Cycle Trail, and the project manager for them for the narrative has come up with, and she says that it's a simple add-on. Is in addition to the written narrative, you just have a QR code, and you can have like a verbal rendition, or pretty much add in whatever extra you like through the QR code.
Yeah.
And that must sound like something that would what's happening at the library.
Yeah, and it's what they've done.
Technically over my head.
Yeah, I guess the thing is it can be updated because it's got a QR code, it's electronic, so it can be updated. I know Waipa District have done that with the history down there as well. I just wanted to put your light on when you speak. Thanks, Michael.
Sure. Just to raise the issue of that for many years, I think people have been doing what's called whakamana i te treaty, and I think ko tai te wā ki te huri te kai a tēnei ki te whakatinana. So how do we give practical expression to the treaty and where we moved? And so takes me back to a quotation of our people, our tūpuna, that would say, ka riro whenua atu me hoki whenua mai. So it was land that was taken, it should be land that is returned. And as a theme, perhaps that's the question one needs to put at the front of how we've given effect to it as the council, as Manawhenua Forum, and that needs to identify. So, right, and we should that occur, or has that occurred, and what are we celebrating? If we're celebrating or acknowledging, we will move from whakamana to whakatinana. That's a theme probably just for us to consider at this stage, and I don't know within the application if the application could even generate that type of engagement with people to come in and say what are the issues within the rohe nei, what has been returned. So we know in settlement you've got the airport for Aotearoa. The Maunga Kōrero up here will be part of the settlement that we're getting with that. And then housing projects and stuff like that that's happening. Those may be some of the areas that you've done, or maybe there's other surplus council land that may be identified that can be freed up for iwi to consider. And those are the challenges for us. But you know, across the council, what can we say that me hoki whenua mai?
Is it beyond what Waitangi Day is though? Isn't that bigger than what Waitangi Day is about?
I was going to say, I think it's exactly what Waitangi Day is all about, because I think as Mike's first point was whakamana, te tiriti, and so that has been about all the actions that we're taking to today to try and raise and lift te tiriti as a founding document of this country. So moving to this other aspect is about, so what does the treaty mean for us today? And that's the important part actually for our district. Is for our district to understand what the treaty means for us today. We're past celebrating it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So we're now moving to giving it effect. The whakatina. You know, so give effect to the tiriti. And the only way you can do that is to understand how it's impacted our rohe, our district.
So I guess the challenge here is this is about commemorating the day. This isn't perhaps, you know, like there's some, like I'm just trying to understand where this sits in this day compared to what this means actually for every day of the year. But we're putting attention on it on that day. So I'm just trying to unpack how council can do, you know, what to do on Waitangi Day, whereas really this is a bigger thing around getting the history and understanding. Perhaps I don't know. Like I'm trying to
just
balance it.
Just for me, it's I don't know. It's just really, and the question was, you know, what's the context for anything that happens on Waitangi Day? And what's been suggested is really down to the basics. The Treaty of Waitangi, what does it look like in MPDC? What the Treaty of Waitangi, how does it translate into every day around the district of MPDC? And it's not everybody has their own little piece of kōrero through the year, and instances where the treaty comes up, but it's in the context of sort of a consolidation. You say this is what the treaty looks like here at this point in time. And it sort of goes to that kōrero of Maitri, take it away from whakamana to whakatīnanga. So, you know, and that's literally pretty much what it means. What does it look like now? So, I don't know.
Does it fit with any of these options that you're, like the storyboards? It's telling the story, isn't it?
Well, I think option 3 gives us the opportunity to start today to think about what some of those, how we might bring some of these, because it certainly looks like it's going to be a bit longer than a one year
Exactly.
project. It might be something that we continue to build for the next few years, and assess is to work with iwi to understand what those stories are and use the resource in that way.
Mm.
You know, and I think if I understand the funding that's available in Te Mātāwai and other government funds align with some of this work, building these sorts of resources.
Mm.
So there might be a bigger project here than we think. Andrew.
Mm.
I think,
Yeah.
for example, storyboards. You know, we should look at how that can be used. You know, it's not just a Waitangi Day thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that, you know, the storyboards have a wider purpose.
School project.
Yeah. In a process with it, whether it's you know, historical kōrero, whether it's and around how long is it up for? You know, it could be regularly changed so that narrative changes and it doesn't become that storyboard down the corner of the park, you know. But if it's updated and has a process that it follows that people know, rather than just Waitangi Day. That's why I think you're right, Gary. It's wider than just Waitangi Day.
Any other kōrero?
Just coming back to saying it's bigger or smaller than this one here goes across those. It's really about on the day of celebrating the effectiveness of the treaty as we move forward. So if we have a list of those and we celebrate that's a move from doing whakamana. And I'm just trying to give some good examples. Here's a good example. We might be invited to, as you go into Morrinsville there, Campbell Park, for example. We might be invited to give a Māori name for the name of the park. But the real question is, are we simply rubber stamping the park and what sits on the land, who's got the land and everything else? Is the ownership really important? Yes, it is. Should the land come back to the iwi? Rather than naming the park, we give back the park. And then there's an arrangement with iwi, giving effect to me hoki whenua mai. We have the ability. And
I guess the challenge with that one isn't council owned.
no, but I'm just using those as examples. So if we move to that, come Waitangi, when we celebrate, if we're at that position, maybe we're celebrating that this year. It might be the naming of the park that year. It may be the naming of whatever you're talking about. But those are the types of things that we give an effect to, and we're celebrating.
Like gifting to middle. 2024.
I think that the budget should increase though, because there's a lot more work and a lot more costs. And I just want to tell you about when elections are completed, what the government, whatever it is, National Act or what they would do about the treaty. I mean, there are implications that, you know, they want to get rid of the treaty. So there's a battle there. But I don't think we've really had enough of a budget, we'd spend the Matamata-Piako treaty, the explanations. Have a look at that, and I think it has to be a gathering of some sort. I think Te Aroha has not had their turn. Probably if Jill, us get together, involve some of the community groups, the ones that will support the idea, we can get something going. And we always talked about a virtual, something virtual, and that can happen while we're at the park or something. That there are things there that they can watch about stories. I know about storyboards because we did that along the Cambridge Expressway, and that's still working well, telling the history of the different areas. But it didn't really impact on the treaty story, so we need to focus more on that. Yeah, and some of the things council does, we need to put that out and the big things. I mean, we're talking about the airfield. That might be an example of something Ngāti Awa and the council are working towards. Like it's just going back to what Mike said. Yeah, but yeah, we probably need a working party.
Yeah. Is it something that's actually like separate? Like there's some work here that's not just specific to one day.
No.
And this is a focus on a day.
Maybe that's what.
And we've got mahi to do, like that's pretty obvious that there's a lot of work that can be done to build that history, build that understanding, and understand the people that were here before us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to because I think with it being Waitangi Day, we probably have to focus on the event or that day at this point, and obviously build on it the other 364 days of the year. This is, what you're talking about isn't just, to me, from my perspective, I'm trying to come to a conclusion here, is that it doesn't, this is about a day, and I think what we're really expressing here is about every day.
Yeah. Normalise.
But how can we bring that forward, maybe? Because Andrew, like, so did option 3, Gary, around the placemaking activation, is that interest? Is that just as an idea, just so that we can give Andrew some guidance as to where we might head?
Good, Andrea. I like number 3, but I think it's a static image, and that kind of, I think Mats was right. You can just make, if you've got 4 static points, then we could make 8 boards and just rotate them through, and it would seem like we're quite progressive throughout the year. But it doesn't, for me, it doesn't engage young people well enough. So my preference was something closer to option number 5, but framing it more like a youth forum, so that they were sharing their understanding of tiriti, that we could target it at that kind of the secondary school, primary school audience, and they could come together to share their ideas. More than anything, if you were hosting a Waitangi Youth Forum, then they would come together to shape the big questions that would kind of be the basis for it, and then this would be their opportunity to share with their community what Waitangi is to them. And it would also allow us to bring in speakers and still kind of share that information that we would have on the static boards, just in a more interactive way. Then we could challenge the young people, kind of share their voice. But if we move too close to reels, it doesn't. That's if we from our tamariki, something like that could push more towards what they're doing with the Māmanu Kōrero, or the race unity speech competition that the council supports. Something close to that, bring young people together, celebrate Waitangi that way, just be a part of their celebration.
Five was my second option.
Are there any thoughts around what happens in South Waikato, just to try and draw on what Rakawa might do? And
well, they have a big thing in Tokoro, and it's always been that way. We shifted it back to Matamata one part there, had to go there, and it sort of worked out. But again, it's about getting people. It's not just one day. My main thing for me is using the schools. I hang around a lot of primary schools a lot, and I think that's where the main story should be told, because they're the ones going to push through everything. And as far as Manawhenua, like everyone knows, it's happening every day. And celebrate. It's just not that one day. But
Yes.
it also gets people together, and it's just about voicing it. It's an ongoing thing, and like I've said, politicians, and that's another story on its own. In my backyard, it's really trying to get to these places just to put your face on the table to tell them, no, it's not right. And without the tiriti, we could be run over. As long as it's there, and hopefully it's going to be there forever. It's just an thing. But my focus has always been with the schools. But what can you do when they just come back on holidays?
Yeah.
Christmas, and it's really hard trying to build it back up again. Get them to do, for me, it's about the waitas, kapahaka. And like you're saying, stories. All about our schools, really, because they're the ones who push through. We're working with one of the playgrounds in Matamata there, and they have the kōreros, which is cool. It's all pushed into one. But then when you live around everything, it's right there. You don't have to talk about it, you can see it. Is this right about our public climbing? That's another issue on the too. It's not just that one day, it's really they're trying to push through. Our motorways, our highways, our land, again, we're genuinely struggling again. I just want our public climbing to be up. Roads are going up. That's another mission I was taking to. So I have to get to these meetings with voiceless. Shut up.
So we got any conclusion here to guide Andrea on what you would like to do?
I guess just coming back to maybe Tiona's point that she's keen to talk with another build back on that the evening this year, whether with Jill.
Do you think Jill would be quite supportive? Yeah. Excellent.
And if that's the case, then we should go with the application based on that, given it is October and the application needs to go in, and then maybe we could think more broadly about what we do next year with some of these other options, maybe on the agenda a bit earlier next year.
And whether we build more into the long-term plan around the storyboards and how we fund it, because there's we've got Morrinsville, a large area to gather a lot of stories, a lot of history, just in general.
Yeah.
So whether that, to be able to get funding, for those sort of work. So if we concentrate on Waitangi Day and
just I sort of feel that there's two conversations going on here. There's one for what do we do 2024 for Waitangi Day, and the other one is really some of the aspirations being expressed as you had put, Adrian, is not just one day, it's through the whole year. And I don't think all of the suggestions that have been around they're all consistent with that kaupapa. So, I don't know whether it gets to the point where there's something, for example, the options, I don't see them as an either or. It could well be we go for option 2 and run a kaupapa as was suggested through option 5 with the schools. But it doesn't, and they don't have to be one or the other. That makes sense.
Challenges. Capacity. You know, like we're in October now, and capacity funding. Yeah. In your hands, guys.
The issue too is that Waitangi Day is usually the first week back at school if they're not still off that week. But you know, like I don't know how you get the wheels turning. There's nothing to stop like that commencing, getting the schools to maybe get a buy-in from the schools for term 4, so that the preparation's done and as an initial for next year is that it's done in term 4. If you know, if the schools, but I you know, always someone dodging work, but
the term will be planned.
if it's something that maybe the schools would be up to picking up.
And I guess we're sitting outside of, where it's what we can do within our council.
Yeah.
And we're pushing it onto schools when their schedules are already, work plans are already in place, and they probably do some work in that space. So yeah.
But that's what I mean.
So do we
suggested to them.
So is it something we think about in an agenda item at a later date, but follow with what Rangi Chiong has suggested around speaking with Jill as a short term, you know, like, because we've got to make a decision here. We've got to apply for some funds for February 2024. Perhaps the korero needs to start earlier around what happens in 2025. So if you're ready to move a recommendation, that'd be Rangi's idea. Was it part of?
It's actually option 2, Adrian.
Iwi-led initiatives. Yes, it is. It is. Indeed right. So Gary would need to move the recommendation. With option and with including Rangi Tionga's.
Yeah, I think, Andrea, I'm happy to move that. And I'm not sure what the options were, but that Rangi Tionga and Jill investigate the celebration of Waitangi Day here at Te Aroha Domain for 2024. But the second resolution should be that before we bring this to the agenda early next year, to start planning for Waitangi to do some of these other options. The second recommendation. So happy to move those.
And is there? All those in any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Does that give you some good guidance there, Andrea? We'll see.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a really good discussion. So it gives a bit more meat to it as well. So I appreciate where you're coming from. And I'll be able to bring something back at the next meeting for you to consider.
Keep it to the forefront, because it's feels like a bit of deja vu. We seem to have this conversation every year.
Sorry.
So just on the putting on the agenda earlier, that was discussed, but I was advised that you're working through your work plan and so on. So I will make sure that's known for next year, or for the planning for the next one, so that it's not put off.
Yeah.
And it's potentially a conversation for us in council to have as well, in support of the storyboards and adding to the history, building the history, actually telling the story. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you very much.
It was great. Like, we needed to talk it through. Okay, so our next item is 7.2 is our schedule of meetings for the year. Has anyone got any suggestions? I was just looking at the Manawhenua meetings in particular, and I just wonder, with the 1st of October will always fall in school holidays. Not sure any of the others do, and whether there would be a preference to try and not have them during school holidays, given that some of our members here might be affected by children at school and it being school holidays, and just throwing it out there, asking the question. I'm just me thinking out loud.
I don't have an issue with children at school.
But others do.
Yeah.
I think because we at the risk of being excluding people is, if we have younger members.
Sure.
Well, that's not only that, I don't have children at school anymore either, but mockos turned up on the doorstep.
On school holidays.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yes.
when a teenager hockey.
Mm. Mm.
But I don't agree, if we go shifting the dates because school holidays, I
That's a problem.
make it all we can't. We've got each UE's got 2 members.
I'm
Yeah,
happy
did you guide them?
I'm happy to support Matu's recommendation
Leave it. Yep.
that we adjust to suit all the school holidays.
To adjust it.
Yeah, to adjust it just so we can move them outside of the school holidays.
That's the only. Is it possible?
Yeah, we can move it to the 10th. I've already got school holidays next year in my calendar, so I just check yes it does, so we can make it the following Tuesday the 10th. Just really keep it nice and clean.
Because I think it does mean that we're being more inclusive, because it is a challenge with school holidays for a lot of people, given that it isn't just Tamari here, it's Moko as well. So yeah, well, yeah. Is there any other feedback on? Like, I was obviously specifically looking at this group. Yeah, that's something the others are. You'll see. So
I'm happy to move it to the 10th of October, if that's the date.
so that we receive and we confirm that, so perhaps for the second we confirm the meeting dates with the suggestion of moving the Manawhenua forum meeting date to October the 10th. Is there a seconder for that?
Am I looking at the wrong list?
There's a full list from council, risk insurance,
Oh,
and then the Te Manawhenua.
yeah.
So it's really, I felt it was pertinent for this group to really look specifically at your schedule of dates and whether it works for you.
It'll be the 8th. Right?
8? Yeah, not the 10th, it's the 8. 8 days, 7 days. Yep.
Right. First and 8th are school holidays. So
Oh,
yeah,
holidays are later.
yeah. So it'll be the 15th or 24th of September if it doesn't clash with any of the other ones.
I guess it's quite close and behind the August one, but that doesn't really matter, does it? Well, just consider changing the date.
Will
Yeah, yeah. So is there a seconder for Gary's move?
Yeah.
Thank you, Watty. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Carry. Thank you. That was it. Like if we can move it, it means that we're being more inclusive. Thank you. Right, now we move on to our information updates and various projects that council's working on. We're 8.2, we've got the long-term plan and policy bylaw update with Laura. Thank you. That's all right. Doesn't matter. I've got it right, haven't I? Yeah. Oh, sorry, there is one. Sorry, I've ticked it off. The update on the council meeting decision, 23rd of August. My apologies, I've dropped down a line. Errands first. Sorry. Confuse everybody.
Kia ora koutou, just here in Tuatahi, Kingston. The report really is very sweet. It provides an update on the council's response to the two reports that Trinity report
or prior to the 23rd of August meeting. So we take the information that's received.
Not at all. Yeah.
If I might just comment to the forum, I guess the reception of the paper, and I don't know if you all called the paper, the reception of paper in council itself, I thought was some challenging discussions around some of the things that we aspire to give to our Māori in our district, and just to, I guess, take the opportunity just to let you know what that was like being presented to council. And I think we've landed on a really what's the gentle position, I guess, with this resolution that was resolved. Did that make any sense? Yeah. I think the way the paper was presented as being the words from the Manawhenua forum weren't received, I guess, in the light, from my perspective, in the light in which they were given.
Intended, yeah.
That's only comment.
Yeah. Any other? Not at all. I think the thing probably is working together and coming to an I guess more of an agreement, and understanding is the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
So someone like to move the information be received if there's no further corridor. Seconder. Gary. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That's when we get together and work together. Righty, now we will move to item 8.2 in the long-term plan and policy bylaw updates. Thank you, Laura.
Kia ora koutou. So the purpose of today's report is just to provide you with an update on our policy work program. So we've got a number of policy reviews that have been completed, along with a number of others that are still in progress. We also have a freedom camping bylaw, which my colleague Olivia will be talking to you next about, and that we're currently consulting on that. So we've got a couple of policies that we've recently reviewed and they've been adopted now. You may recall that we've had a few conversations about these two. First is the local alcohol policy. This is where it sets a direction for our district licensing committee to when they make decisions on alcohol licenses, and it's an opportunity for us to talk to our community. They can have involvement about where alcohol is sold and supplied in our district. So after a bit of a lengthy process, this has now been adopted. Very similar to the last one. The policy provisions are quite similar. However, council have decided to extend the distance that sensitive sites can be away from off licenses, so to provide that protection for some of our more vulnerable members of our community. We've also recently adopted a new significance and engagement policy, which I think we talked about last meeting, last week. And council decided to trial a new way of determining significance. So we're moving towards more of a spectrum of significance. So from low to high, rather than just a black and white decision of whether something is significant or not. And we've taken some of your feedback from last time and incorporated that into the policy. So thank you very much for providing that. So those two are done and out of the way. But the major project that we do have on at the moment, as you will know, is the long-term plan. So this is a very key, important document that council sets out the vision, financial and infrastructure strategies, some key financial policies, levels of service, all of that sort of stuff for the next 10 years. So that's reaching quite a critical point at the moment. We're working through lots of different things, like our budgets, all the different elements that make up the plan, and we're working towards having council sign that off and sign off the consultation document in December. And we'll be going to consultation early next year, March, April. And also we have our annual report where we report on if we have achieved our community objectives from what we said we would do in the annual plan. So that's progressing nicely. Hoping that will be adopted by the end of this month. And the other thing on your report there, we also earlier in the year, we consulted on our solid waste bylaw, and there was just a little aspect in there that council thought needed a bit of further consultation, and that was the introduction of construction site waste minimisation plans. And we need to do a bit more work with the sector to talk to them about that a little bit further. So that hasn't been adopted yet, but we're planning for some further targeted engagement on that one. And yeah, so I think that was about what we've got going on at the moment. If there are any kōrero or pātai, be happy to hear them. Thank you.
Any feedback? Is there any like obviously we've got a recommendation the report be received, and then obviously number 2 is that the forum members provide feedback to staff on the consultation process to inform and improve future policy bylaw reviews. You know, is there any feedback? I think by slipping an extra meeting into our schedule does help you get things up front rather than retrospectively. Is there any feedback? No. Oh, well, if there's no further.
I think, Madam Chair, if I might just make a comment, I think one of the things we're missing, or the forum's missing, is the ability to caucus on some of these issues collectively. You know, so while we're sitting here making decisions today, we haven't really had the chance to just sit and refresh ourselves. What are the impacts of each of these agenda items? So, particularly the last agenda item, which is the the aspirations paper. You know, there was a lot of thought, and I guess a lot of thought went into drafting that paper, and we haven't had the opportunity to reflect on the content of that paper, to remind ourselves of the sorts of things that we talked about, to be able to bring those thoughts freshly into the conversations. And this is probably another one of those. There's such a lot of policy that we've fed into over a period of time without having the ability to refresh ourselves about some of the things we've talked about and raised amongst ourselves. It's hard to then pull it back out all of a sudden and have something worthy to say. My thoughts.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I'm just happy that it's incorporated into council's key strategic document. It wasn't anywhere before. And then we can talk about how we meet those aspirations with the council. Like, I mean, when tuatai's back, we can set up a way forward so that council and EU can debate or consider those aspirations. Because we want all of them in, but there might be things that council see as we might have to wait. So when he's back,
and I think that's the conversation, the korero that needs to build that understanding, isn't it? To be assured that we've received it and there is a willingness. I think that's the key. Is it, Gary, because now you're a councillor and you see it more closely as to how we do work with Manawhenua? I guess the challenge is this is a small group of people, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how do we reach out to our iwi?
because it speaks to that second resolution, doesn't it? So,
And it's engage.
Yeah.
I've said all along, I don't like the word consult. It doesn't sit easy with me. I think it's about engagement and connection. You have to have that engagement and connection first and foremost. Connection's the first thing. So.
and I wonder if I might just ask Mike, knowing that you're doing a lot of work with other councils, how we can be more effective in giving advice to some of these, or giving our perspective on a number of these policies across our footprint, I suppose.
Right, so we had Eke Panuku, who's probably the commercial arm.
Yeah.
I hate to jump into the commercial arm, but not suggesting for a moment that council is all about commercial, but that's a very good example. And councils are now under stress of everyone's reductions in budgets going forward, and they come back with things like 10-year plans. And what does that mean? So iwi, from one lens, we have the environmental plans and we have our own plans. When you read that into it, it talks about prosperity of our whānau and our hapu prospering with the relationship with council. And what does that actually mean? So, for example, you've got solar power that's going up here. There's a solar farm that's happening inside this here. We have to get across that. Are we simply rubber stamping an external body that's going to come here and take our power? And how does that actually relate back to iwi? And if there's a disaster, for example, solar power, and what are the advantages for our people? So our area across this in an RMA real level, and it's probably one of the biggest things that will happen in this area in the very next, in the very close future. And that considers 3, I think 4 have CIAs across it and have been working with it. What does that actually mean? And so that's the relationship on that level that we look at with a developer coming into the area. And yet we seem to be walking 100 miles an hour, putting overseas opportunity for overseas people to actually establish this within our rohi. What is actually happening with the council for us in the commercial space here? And while we might talk about housing and developments and stuff like that, that's a huge opportunity. So in a nutshell, what does it mean? It means that the government gives across $700,000, of which we have to only pay back about $100,000 if we've got it right. So that's very successful. Who else could get a house for $150 inside 15 years and pay it off? And that's a huge opportunity. Now, we see a lot of development that's happening in the area here to bring money for people out of the regionalised, and you see the people moving from Auckland down into this area. When you look at that scale against iwi scale, what's actually happening here? And therein lies the challenges, and hence why the question is, so what spare land does either central government as well as other governments actually have across it? And this is in Auckland. In Auckland, they're telling us they've got none. In Auckland, they're telling us they can't do this, they can't do that. In Auckland, they're saying this to us. And yet we've got, just in one generation up there, you've got 7,000 being bowled over for 21,000 being created. Me as an iwi, I asked inside that framework, where do I get 10? I'm now up to about the 3rd term, and not 10 houses have arrived on my doorstep. So, you know, from one lens to another, it gives us a real sense of what is our relationship really about. Are we simply upholding and rubber stamping everyone else and walking alongside council to do other people's kaupapa, or is it really real? And what are the outcomes that sit there for us? So for us as Ngāti Whanau, when we come to the table, I suppose that's what I'm measured against when I've got to go back. And then they go, well, Mike, you've been down, you've been up to Auckland, I've got staff up there doing that, and yet this is the end result against that. Our capacity to be able to walk alongside Jesus, the capacity that we have at this table here, But to really grow the industry within this framework is the big issues. And we sit around and watch it. We watch it over in the other areas. A lot of those. Only yesterday, I met with a developer up there, and these are for elderly, and they talk about it like this, and it goes something like this. It goes, the elderly are scaling down. I said, what does that actually mean in terms of costs? They're scaling down their costs, they're selling up, and the elderly are buying a house at 1.6 million to 3 million. That's scaling down. I just think to myself, crikey, dicks, how do you scale down from where are these 500 people coming from, or 200 people coming from, that's scaling down at that level? Where does our people fit into that plan? They don't. So our people have got to create the opportunities. At the moment, Manawhenua has created apartment blocks up there for our people, which is, even that's very high. And then how do we get across it? So what we've got to do is look for mechanisms that fit into this. And that's where the relationship with council and us, if that's what you're talking about, and the types of things that we compare with what we're doing across other areas is what we're trying to do down here. But there are big open that's happening here, and probably good examples, Morrinsville, that's happening on our doorstep there and over the other areas. So the question for us is where then are our advantages? We sit on an iwi Church forum, and in the iwi Church forum, and bless their soul, if you go down to over there, and I look to the eastern tribes over there that are just suffering from Gabriel and etc., they're working flat tech. And so prior to Gabriel, they had already got with council 50 to $60 million across what we have sitting here, a position with central government, with council, to pull the money into this area. And they've already got that one working. They've got that happening into the ground. And then on top of that, they then got Gabriel coming in on top of it. So they're working across it. What I've been told is that in council similar to this size, which would possibly be the Gisborne up to that end sort of area, those sort of ones, and even in Whakatoa here, they and our iwi people that drive it collectively, they will go out and they'll get central government money and then pull the money back to you, which comes back to us. It might be a long story of getting there, but that's basically what we effectively need to do. So we need to have the Huli Te Ahos, who actually helps set up some of the iwi groups in this area. And that's the person we're talking about here, who goes across and gets 58 million, who goes across and gets another 100 million, and then he pulls it across, and we get this development happening for us across this. And everything else that's meant to be sitting inside your area with civil construction. And as we know, civil construction is a big thing that's happening at the moment. It's about the easiest, quickest way out of COVID that they came up with, which is where they threw the money into. And so the eastern ones still feel left out. So they're, and iwi feel left out. And where does our partnership sit with NZTA? So there is still, come October, that meeting that's got to be held. And how does procurement actually happen? So that's around the 5% bottom line mechanism. And what does that actually mean, 5%? One would imagine if there's $1 billion, what's 5% of $1 billion? Mathematician. Well, you can imagine.
Yeah.
So they've got 20 of these projects happening in Auckland. So they're 20% times 5%. But when you actually get into it with iwi, we seem to end up, it's a moving framework, and then all of a sudden it drops down to this, down to that, down to the next thing. And I think we're lucky if we're looking at 10 million of that opportunity. That gives us sort of a front to what it actually delivers across that. So I don't know if I've helped you with that question, but that's, I think, what we do when we come into these from another council over here to help on our Let's Go across. Well,
so I guess it sort of does apply, but this is more around the bylaws as well. I guess it's how we work together, isn't it?
I think what Mike's talking about is priorities. You know, so clearly there are some serious priorities that we see in other spaces. That's where the focus is. And so how does a policy like alcohol, tobacco, things that affect that that focus.
Mm.
It doesn't, because it's so far down on the priority list that actually we're all over here doing this bigger stuff. You know, that the ability as we to drill down into these policies and to be able to unpack some guidance for you that's going to be meaningful for Te Ao Māori. Hopefully, Mike, that's a bit of a summary of what you just talked about.
You get caught with having to pick.
Yeah.
Pick priorities.
Yeah. And that's at the macro level, but it's also drills down a little bit deep, because everybody that's working at that macro level is actually the workers on the ground at the micro level.
Yeah. So I guess the question that I'd have then is with the work we've done through the Manawhenua Forum in updating the alcohol policy, it was brought quite early in the piece. So there's been an opportunity to give feedback. It's not been just given retrospectively. It's gone out for consultation, and I guess it's where did we go out for consultation? Who did we meet with? Who participated? And I guess this is where the inform and improve is around not only this table but our people.
Probably if I could just add one more layer to that, to my ordinal, is that actually it's our whānau that operate at the Māori provider level. And so we saw through the submissions process that it was our Māori providers that were coming in to give feedback on the policies that are before us. And so we had good feedback through those. And I guess at a iwi level, and I don't want to be speaking for everyone here, but that's where we default, is to our kaimahi on the ground who are doing the mahi to be able to submit things like this, because it affects them directly.
So I just want to jump into there, focused on that particular issue regarding responding back to these and being a collective here. Probably makes sense that we have somebody that acts on our behalf of the collective here at the forum to actually respond to those documents and to those positions. And most of us have expertise at our fingertips that could possibly put forward a nominee person that could work for our behalf and then get that paper resolved within a quick time frame for you. So that we.
In what respect? Like with a.
Well, it doesn't matter what policy is, but if it's the alcohol one, then we could possibly nominate a specialist that will work on behalf of us all and give us a paper back here. That would be independent to the council, but funded by the council, of this council. So you'd have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of us sitting around here. And at the forum, we receive the paper back here, and then it gets across and gives you a very direct position. Of course, here we will have a direct position different again to the scope that the health providers will be looking at, or those other ones might be looking at from a social angle. There will be other angles that they'll look at as well around that.
It's all over you.
Yeah, again, I don't want to be putting words in people's mouth, but it's about capacity.
It is. And resource. So, yep. Any other feedback? I guess it's how engage with iwi Manawhenua with the long-term plan going forward and the opportunities that could be debated, discussed. Maybe there's a need for a workshop, maybe with Manawhenua around the long-term plan conversation. That might be, I don't know, is that like with you, this is your first long-term plan too, Gary. So it's like I'm deferring to Gary because he's the man on the ground with myself in the chamber, and I guess it's your perception and where the opportunities may sit. And I hate deferring to you all the time, but it's your thoughts, your reflections that are I think are quite pertinent to the group. Hard.
Well, I think for me, it's back to what I talked about being focused at macro. It is about priorities. And while Mike's suggestion is about having a resource available to Manawhenua Forum that can create policy positions on behalf of Te Māori, that is a resourcing and capability question. So that firmly sits with council if they even want to consider it. in the long-term plan. But yeah, other than that, it is about a priority conversation. And responding to policies like this is not a high priority for you. We don't have the resource or capacity to do that. So we have to default, or they have to default to the people that are on the ground that are working in those spaces who absolutely have a mandate to and a commitment to respond to the policies.
And is it a case of acknowledging that they do engage? While it might be at a different level, there is engagement. It's not like there's no engagement, that we do have. Yeah. But at the same time, there's
at
another.
the same time, it's not acceptable to the Almighty that they can't respond in a way that's appropriate. So,
makes sense. Alrighty. So would someone like to move the report we received and and provide feedback? Consultation process to inform and improve future policy and bylaw reviews. Getting better. Or I think it's getting better. The seconder, first a mover, is Gary having to move?
I'm happy to move it. I'm doing all the talking.
Mike's going to second. Thank you, Mike. That's great. All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Thank you. Good discussion. And now we have Olivia with our freedom camping bylaw. Now this is one that I think we've agreed that there's been some good kind of around appropriate places. You know, it's not
a good iwi engagement.
It's very good iwi engagement, and acknowledge that. Thank you. Good morning, Olivia. Now, Olivia is one of our new policy people. Been with us a couple months now. Oh, that's the tricky one. Yeah, you know, not to push that. We should put something over that to stop us push that button. It's like the big ball on the.
It's Olivia's first time in front of a committee, so you are the lucky first people to talk to.
So tēnā koutou katoa, ko engineer te whakaranga mai, ko te rangi te whenua tupu, ki roto tuna o e noho ana, ko Olivia Pickard ko ingoa, tēnā katoa. So I'm here this morning to present to you the report on the freedom camping bylaws. So we've started to go out for consultation from the 18th of September until the 18th of October. And we will have a hearing on the 8th of November for people to come in and present their submissions to council if they would like to. We've had staff go out to the community because we've gone to Morrisville Library, Matamata Library and Te Araha Library to provide the community an opportunity to submit questions or say. And we've also started to get some submissions coming in. So this is more an opportunity if you guys have any questions or comments or anything around this. It's on our proposal that we've got going at the moment.
Thank you, Olivia. Any kōrero? I think there's some great engagement around the appropriate, you know, where the conversation was had around where these sites could be, and I thank the Manawhenua for their feedback. Staff have appreciated the engagement in this. It was something, doing this bylaw was something that council, while we didn't fully need it as a problem, we felt it was worth putting in place to again build this framework and to give us the opportunity to enforce when people did stop over in places that were not acceptable, and obviously stop over for longer than they should be. There's the 4 nights, the 28-day turnaround. You can't just move to the next park. You've got to move on. So there's some really good engagement in this. You had an open day in Matamata recently, and people were engaging in that as well. So, is there any feedback for Olivia at this point in time?
I thank all of you for having the freedom camping out up at Been an ongoing thing with us as a community of Rapatu with mayor that was before you, and only because it's significant of the place where Mahitarangi had favour because of Otokoa, and it's just rubbish, a lot of rubbish being polluted there, and we're trying to sort of put a gate there to stop people from living there. we find out that, I'm going to say, the locals are okay. It's people who are not from there, just dump everything. I didn't mind the rubbish one part there, but then it started going into our awa, where our little babies swim, you know, and it was really dangerous. We would have to give them the water first, make sure there was no broken glass. And that place has been with us forever. It's in my backyard again. And but I thank all of you for not having freedom camping there. We're trying our hardest to not let people stay there. You know, there's a lot of homeless people around, but at the end of the day, it's about the area being clean. And we're working with a new guy called Bo, I think, with the council. And we still got to have a meeting with him properly, you know. Brian Turner, before him, he was brilliant.
Yeah. He
was the mover, him and the other mayor. So with this guy, Bo, we need to get back to him again as part of the community or Raparatu. And again, I thank all of you for camping, having freedom camping.
So who's the contact? Who would Bo liaise with? Is it with you directly?
Well, we're going for another thing with our chairperson. She's really having trouble with life. So we sort of just let her go. We had a yesterday with Maroko, turned up at our marae. And she's happy to move. And we're getting our group in together again to push ourselves forward again and put our chairperson back in again and get straight towards Bo. And, you know, just keep doing it. Yeah, it's for our future, for our mokos. You know, and,
and showing respect for the area. Let's be honest, it's about showing respect to the mana of the.
But I thank you. Thank the council.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah, feedback. Alrighty, would someone like to move that the information we received? Yeah. Feedback. Thanks, Ryan. You're waving over the other way. The other way. Mike, seconded.
Just to add to the comment, and I quite like that idea. You know, we have got the freedom camping actually occurring. There needs to be a board, probably significance, the historical and about the values that I've just talked about there. And of course, the recycling of rubbish. Obviously, it's going to attract that. That won't always be picked up, so there needs to be something brought into that framework of all of that to be tidied up by the council. So I think if we're opening up the freedom camping type policy, we have to take up the mess that goes with it.
Yeah, well, they're meant to be self-contained, so I guess you're always going to get a little bit of that. I think a storyboard would be a great idea for them, around the cultural significance of that in that space.
We're trying to get back with Bo again to deal with this properly.
Yeah, okay. We can talk to him.
Yeah, Bo's in my team as well. Yes, I have to talk to him and ask him to and do it. Okay, there we go. I'll get him to get in contact.
He's a busy young man. No, that's great. So motion to moved Rangi, seconded Mike. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. And then we've got Commissioner online for the district plan update. Morena, Commissioner.
Morena, ko Kamesh Tukuingoa. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So, yes, I'm here to present the district plan update. So we'll start off with our plan change 54, or Papakainga plan change. So this plan change seeks to update our district plan provisions for Papakainga development. So the aim behind this plan change is to ensure an enabling framework for quality development that supports tangata whenua in our district. This was raised by the TMF and then recommended to Council as a priority. Council accepted this and therefore we initiated our plan change. So there are two Māori purpose zones. We've got our Māori Purpose Zone 1 or Papakainga Tahi, and these are the most enabling provisions, and it's characterised by the increased housing density compared to general rural provisions. Sites have been identified as having existing marae or directly adjoining Māori freehold blocks. The proposed density on our Māori Zone 1 Papakainga is 1 residential unit per 5,000 metres squared with a maximum of 10 units as a permitted activity. So anything outside of that would need a risk consent. It also allows for the establishment of home businesses, small scale community. Sorry, yes,
can you turn your video off? It's just you're breaking up a little bit, so we might be better just to turn your audio.
Sure.
Your audio, just hear your voice. That'd be great because you're just breaking up a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
We'll try that.
No worries. Yes, I wasn't sure if you managed to catch the density. It was 1 residential unit per 5,000 square meters, with a maximum of 10 units as a permitted activity. So anything outside that density would need a resource consent. It also allows for establishment of home businesses, small-scale community facilities, education facilities, and health facilities, as well as urupa relocatable buildings and accessory buildings. So that was all about our Māori Purpose Zone 1. Our Māori Purpose Zone 2, or Papakainga Rua, these zones have been identified on Rukumoana Road, Kutia and Gillett Road, and these have existing papakainga on them. Therefore, they're connected to council services and therefore able to provide for further housing subject to the appropriate standards of amenity. So the maps to view these are on our website under Rukumoana Road and Rangaiti Marae. And so these sites are able to build 1 house per 500 square meters if the area is under Māori freehold land, or there's a legal mechanism put in place to ensure that the land is maintained in whānau ownership in perpetuity or forever. So that was all about our Papakainga Rua. And then additionally, there will be district-wide provisions for sites that were not included in those 2 zones, and these will enable development on Māori freehold land, general land owned by Māori, and treaty settlement land. So throughout our plan change process, there has been 52 submissions, 2 further submissions, all available on our web page, and you can actually click on the submitter's name and have a look at the submission itself. And our iwi working group nominated commissioners for the panel, and now that we've finalised all our engagement with submitters, we are working towards setting a hearing date. So on to our Plan Change 49, Waharoa. So MPDC has been working alongside Ngāti Hoa Iwi Trust on the Waharoa Plan Change, which is looking to review the zoning and development controls of Waharoa. So it started with a preliminary community hui, and a working group was established, and there was a high-level spatial plan developed from that. So in late November, MPDC and Ngāti Hoa had a consultation event to understand if that spatial plan that was developed would meet the needs of the community. So does it reflect what the community needs? And so there was an online survey for people who couldn't attend the hui itself. In total, there was 180 participants who submitted their views and their thoughts, and a summary can be found on the web page. So that's quite good, 180 participants to get involved with that, so that's great. And our reporting planner is currently working on draft proposed provisions before moving forward with the plan change. So next up we have our Plan Change 55, Fonterra or Waitoa. So the Fonterra factory, Waitoa, currently operates under the development concept plan in our district plan, and the noise from the site is governed by a noise emission control boundary. So in November in 2020, Council received a private plan change application to amend the current noise emission control boundary in the district plan and replace it with a new one, which would amend some of the associated rules. So Council made a request in January last year for further information under clause 23 of the RMA. And Council did receive a response to this further information request at the end of November last year, and they've been working with the applicant to finalise this information. Plan Change 57, Calcutta. So in July last year, Council received the application for private Plan Change 57. This is to rezone approximately 41 hectares of land located on the southern side of Tauranga Road from rural to general industrial zone. So this general industrial zone is proposed to have specific provisions that will provide for dry industry, which will have a low impact on water and wastewater services. Additional to this, the first plan change will introduce a Calcutta development area plan, and this will offer a future development framework, and it will provide for an upgrade of State Highway 24 and the Tower Road, Burwood Road roundabout to incorporate dual lanes and an internal road network, and also integrated public amenity areas within the development area plan. So that would look at things like open spaces, reserve networks, walking, cycling networks, and protection of existing trees. So we opened for submissions last year and further submissions this year, 28 submissions and 20 further submissions. And a summary of these can be found on our webpage. So Council and the applicant are currently finalising a hearing date, which is anticipated to be for later this year. All right, so we're on to private plan change 58, Avenue Industrial Park. So Council received a request for private plan change 58 from Warwick and Marion Stefford in December last year. And this is to rezone 14 hectares of rural land on the western side of Morrinsville, between Avenue Road North and State Highway 26, and change that over to industrial zone. So it is proposed that this zone is expected to adopt the same general industrial zone provisions as Calcutta, under the National Planning Standards, so dry industry and a development area plan is associated with this plan change. So very similar to Calcutta. So between June and July, we received 13 submissions and 1 further submissions in August, and a preliminary hearing has been scheduled for December this year. We're nearly there. Our National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land, so we call that NPS-HPL. This came into effect in October last year, and this new statement is about ensuring availability of our country's most favourable soils for food and fibre production for now and in the future. So this policy provides direction to improve the way highly productive land is managed under the RMA, and this is achieved through clear guidelines to councils on how to map and zone highly productive land and manage subdivisions, use and development of this non-renewable resource. Since its release, though, there have been 2 major issues that have been raised regarding its restrictions. One is the specified infrastructure, such as solar farms, and also the establishment and expansion of indoor farm activities and greenhouse gases and greenhouses. The Ministry for the Environment and the Ministry of Primary Industries are currently looking for feedback from iwi, local government, interested organisations and individuals regarding the amendments of the statement. And they're accepting, well, the consultation period closes at the end of this month. So, so that was about our NPS-HPL. And then also another NPS, but this time National Planning Standards. So the purpose of the national planning standards is to create consistency across council plans and policy statements, while also making them easier to prepare, understand, and increase compliancy. We have commenced work on reformatting our district plan to comply with these standards. Some of these changes to the district plan are fairly simple and can move into the new format without requiring a plan change. However, some of the changes are a bit more complex and therefore will be needing to be notified. The aim is by mid next year to have these changes completed, notified, and complying with the NPS legislation. And then I think we've just got 2 more items. One is our Hauraki Gulf Forum. So this forum was established through the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park Act 2000, and they work as a body to promote integrated approach to management and protection of the Gulf. The current focus is on collaborative planning, water restoration through addressing land use activities, not just in the immediate Gulf area, but also outside of it, and advocating for protection, restoration, and enhancement. So the natural capital valuation carried out by the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research is now complete and can be read on the link using that's in the report. The Gulf had an estimated capital value of $100 billion using the total economic value framework. So that was the way in which they valued the Gulf. And that looked at things like direct and indirect use value, as well as value for others and existence values. So that's a great report to have a read of. And also following on from our last meeting, Hauraki District Council Mayor Toby Adams was elected as the forum's co-chair, and our existing Tangata Whenua co-chair Nicola McDonald will continue in her role until March next year. And so during these presentations, we also had updates on Kalupa and our RMS Niagara shipwreck and its potential to leak fuel into the Gulf. So in terms of the shipwreck, it's coming up to what they call a leak. It's leak peak period, which is when it's most likely to start leaking fuel. So the forum was advocating for a greater government involvement in assessing how much fuel is on board, because that is still unknown, and also when are we looking at the leak, and also to what extent. So yes, so those are the 2 major threats, amongst others, for the Gulf at the moment. We have had 1 additional meeting, which was on the 11th of September, where we had presentations on the state of seabirds in the Gulf, bioremediation work using seaweed, particularly saltwater seaweed, forestry and traces of heavy metals, amongst other presentations as well. We also had the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research, who are the people that did the valuation. So they presented to the forum about their findings and what their methodology was. And Alex Rogers from the forum will be attending council's meeting to present the report and address any follow-up questions. And finally, we are onto our national policy framework, also known as the RMA reform. So the government is currently undertaking a reform to replace the RMA, or Resource Management Act, with 3 new pieces of legislation. So these new pieces will be called the Natural and Built Environment Act, the Spatial Planning Act, and the Climate Adaptation Act. So the Natural and Built Environment Act, which was the first one mentioned, and the Spatial Planning Act were given royal assent, so therefore they are now in effect. But the RMA does still remain in force and our main piece of legislation, while new planning frameworks under those two acts are still being developed. The framework will look very different to the current system, and the main planning documents that we will be using will be our regional and spatial strategies and our natural and built environment plans, as well as a national planning framework. So the national planning framework is developed by central government, and that's hopefully going to be done by 2025, and that provides national guidance and direction for regional planning. And then the other two planning documents there, which is the regional planning strategies and natural and built environment plans, that's developed at a regional level. So the Ministry of Environment recently received a draft of the transitional planning framework, and currently they're going through a consultation period with targeted consult with local government and Māori, and this will end on the 13th of December this year. And I believe that brings us to the end of my update. Do we have any questions?
No, I think all.
Very fulsome.
And I really look forward to the public coming into the hearing, going to that hearing, listening to how it goes, and I think that's a real big win for this forum.
Yes.
Panel, you made mention of the panel. Do iwi get to put forward a?
They did.
Panel? Has it already been chosen? Has it?
Yeah, iwi had given that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, kapai, that's good. Thank you. That was all. Yeah.
Would someone like to move the information be received, please? Moved Mike, seconded Gary. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, our final item is the forum work programme update for October, and you'll see there the Te Reo Māori policy update is going to be provided at the next meeting, as is the Manawhenua engagement guide review. There's no updates for the other things, and we've ticked off top three. Any feedback? Was information be received? Anyone okay? Someone like to move that be received? Or have you got comment? No? Moved Mike, seconded Lottie. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That draws our meeting to close. Would someone might like to karakia? Thank you. Close to karakia and bless the food. Thank you.
Yeah, karakia. Nui, what the heck? No.
Sorry, is that okay?
No, taitina. Ako tai te wā ki te whakairi wa tata ki te koro ki te taho tēnei o ngāwhare. Hei tiki atu anu mā tātou pau he hiri pau, rama pau, te whakaro pau, te tangata. Ako te pau e he ai tātou katoa, a hau mi e hui e. O hore nei ngā kai ki runga I tēnei wa tātou tēpu hei aha hei whangai wa tātou wairo ki te torotoro I krai tiko mā te kai whakora. Āmene. Āmene.
Thank you, everybody.